Good afternoon and welcome. So my name is Greg Kettman. I'm with Lenovo, and someone in the back row, can you hear me all right? Excellent. So Greg Kettman, I'm a product manager with Lenovo. Joining me today will be Julian. Julian will be joining me in just a couple minutes to talk about some very specific experiences that he's had implementing Azure Stack for his customers. So first off, a very high-level overview of Azure Stack. So show of hands, how many people are running Azure Stack or at least know what it is? That's very good. Glad to hear that. So Azure Stack is an extension of Azure. Bring Azure down, bring it into your own environment, and then you can take advantage of local security, local latency, behind the firewall experiences, all of the above. All of the above. So is what we, Lenovo, as one of the vendors in this space, have created an Azure Stack. I gave a talk a little bit ago, and will also others, on the innovations and enhancements that have been made since we first GA'd Azure Stack about a year ago. So it's being increased to 16 nodes, got all flash coming, other capabilities such as that, node expansion in the field, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. But you can find out about that in our booth. Not only can you find out about it in our booth, but in our booth, if you go over there, our booth is over that direction, and we do have giveaways there. Listen to the session. Julian will be giving his talk a couple of times. You can learn more about what Calligo's doing in this space, and you can get free giveaways. So those are available in our booth. I please encourage you to stop by there for that as well. Now, the idea of Azure Stack is that it's simple, agile, transformative experience, but many of you are using Azure Stack, and I don't need to get into that. So with that in mind, the button doesn't seem to like me today. With that in mind, I'm just going to go over a couple of our customers that have adopted that, and then Julian's going to take you through another, he himself. So Cloudion was one where we have done this. So in these environments, we've done it both with service providers, like Julian, who are in this marketplace to be able to sell services then to their customers, hosted environments, et cetera. We also have customers that are doing that. So the issue or the challenge is that lots of customers want to move to the cloud, but if you're moving to the cloud, there are security challenges. There is data residency challenges. There are latency requirements. So cloud doesn't work for everybody or every application and all that. So in this case, we installed in Cloudion, and it enabled them to create their environment. Another one is Taiwan Mobile, all right? Fastest growing mobile telecommunications in Taiwan. Same thing in their environment. So they needed a way to deliver cloud. They needed a way to control their own cloud. They need a way to take that environment and build it out. So we created that solution for them. We've been working hand in hand with them to enhance that solution, and that's their environment. So that's all I'm going to go into, because what we're going to do is we're going to do a deep dive into Calligo. So this is our case study. This is the Lenovo slide that we have on Calligo. So Calligo has adopted, in a big way, Azure Stack, and they're creating value and delivering it to their customers using Azure Stack. With that in mind, Julian is going to come up and talk to us about his implementation of Azure Stack.
Cheers, Greg. Oh, I'm obviously a bit louder. A lot louder, actually. Yeah, as Greg said, my name's Julian Box. I'm the founder and CEO of Calligo. I also do the CTO role as well, so I can sort of talk a little technically if I do get any questions. So we're going to talk about our experience with the Azure Stack, and specifically all the stuff we've done with Lenovo around it. Yeah, this doesn't work very well. Oh, there you go. So I'm going to just cover off who we are so you can get a bit of context. So we're a data optimization company that uses cloud technologies for our clients. We're headquartered in Jersey, in the Channel Islands, the original Jersey, not New Jersey. It is actually where New Jersey got its name from, if you want to Google that. And we've got offices around the world. We're roughly 7 years old, and we've got infrastructure dotted all over the globe as well, roughly 100 people. And we have quite a big tilt towards data privacy, data protection, ethics around data. That's what Calligo was founded on. I felt that the cloud could be done differently. People would care where their data was, who had access to it, and what laws were applicable in that particular part of the world. And you fast forward to today, and we're not just having to deal with it from a ethical perspective, but there's laws literally coming out by the week. And just literally in the last few weeks, we've had California bring out laws, and you'll see in the States now, because they don't have a federal level data protection law, as you probably already know, lots of states are starting to adopt their own much higher level of data privacy laws on a state-by-state basis. And we actually deal with clients now that have probably a dozen to 15 different privacy laws that they have to deal with. And also we have to deal with the whole ethical piece. Cambridge Analytics is a really good example. That company didn't actually break any laws, but was dead within 2 days. Not because of a law, but because people felt that it wasn't doing what it should have been doing with that particular piece of data. So we have a big focus around everything we do, covers the whole ethical and data protection piece, and that sort of flows into why we have taken the Azure Stack and deployed it in quite a few locations. So we were one of the first people to get the Azure Stack. I think we got number 1 or number 2 off the production line in Europe. And we've now actually got, as you can see here, we've actually got 6 stacks dotted around the globe. And a lot of them are in jurisdictions that have a unique requirement, Canada being probably the exception, but even in Canada, I'll come back to that location. All the other locations have 2 things in common. One is that Microsoft actually isn't in them, other than maybe London when we go there. And also, from a data residency perspective, there are quite tight rules around what you can and can't do with data in those locations. So there was a driving need for technology to be put into jurisdiction. Lots of our clients are big Microsoft users, but couldn't use the public cloud. So it was a big driver for our decision to invest in the actual Azure Stack. And we do everything, as I say, from all the privacy stuff. We do Azure Stack, we do various other things around cloud that you would expect, a lot of AI, anything to do with data and how you manipulate that data, and it's always done in jurisdiction with privacy wrapped all the way around it. And this is our, I suppose, vision of the world. You just have a little quick look at that. So why is it important to us? I suppose, mentioned it a few minutes ago because of the jurisdictions we're in, but also what we're seeing, even with GDPR, if you must have heard of it by now, but even if you're having to deal with it or not deal with it, one of the interesting things that you see is that this law is applicable in 28 countries, yet if you go to those countries, they all pretty much want their data still inside the same country. So if you're French, you want it in France. If you're German, you want it in Germany. But the reality is this law gives you the same rights and the same protection no matter where that data is. But the perception is still that they want businesses and consumers want their data in the country that they actually live. So it's a really noticeable thing that we're seeing out there that it's driving the sort of adoption of how people process data. So for us, the bottom one there is the data residency is a clear driver for us. But we also have a lot of clients that do hybrid. And I don't mean private cloud. We are a multi-tenanted deployment of Azure Stack. We don't deploy this on a client-by-client basis. We run it as a multi-tenanted environment. So when I talk about hybrid, it would be that our clients are using more than just the Azure Stack. They might be using the Azure Cloud. They might be using some of our other cloud technologies. Or they might be using some of the other public clouds, but very much as a multi-cloud environment, and allowing our clients to have multiple cloud technologies in jurisdiction was another big driver for us. And then ultimately, the innovative, everything we do, we try and drive through innovation. We're not a massive player, we're a niche player, and therefore innovation is at the forefront of everything we do, and we believe this is quite innovative. You know, Microsoft are really the only guys that are doing this. They're not going to go in every single country in the world. They need partners to do that, and that's where we saw our opportunity. And therefore, you know, going forward, we had to find a partner that we were actually going to be happy with, I suppose, put it bluntly. And so we looked at all the players. At the time, there was only 3 that could actually sell the Azure Stack: Lenovo, Dell, and HP. And we did look at them, even though we had historically been a Lenovo partner for many years. We still looked at them all because this was all brand new. And what was interesting for us was the fact that Lenovo were always just slightly ahead of the other guys. And that's still the case today. So for us, it was, we wanted to be ahead of our competitors, and Lenovo gave us that ability to do that. Let's see if I can. So I'm going to give you 3 case studies where we're actually deployed the technology now live, and give you an idea of why we're doing it. Some of them I've sort of touched on already. So this is an investment organisation. They're quite big. They're a global investment organisation, but as the second line there says, they are an offshore, so they're in multiple offshore jurisdictions around the globe, and we're in multiple offshore jurisdictions, or part of us is, and they have a requirement to keep that data processed within that jurisdiction. A lot of people think that it's a legal requirement to do that. You see here the Swiss going, oh, you've got rules that says you can't move the data out. It's actually not true. There's only one country in Europe that has that, and that's Luxembourg. And now with GDPR, that's a lot tougher for them to enforce anyway. But what you do get is compliance issues. So if you start processing financial information in a different jurisdiction, it's liable to be taxed in that jurisdiction. And there's a lot of case study law that actually shows where governments have won that, because the data has been processed in the UK government deems it's taxable in the UK. So in this case, for these guys, they have to have the data processed in the jurisdiction. Their clients are expecting that because that's how their tax efficiency works. So this was all about deploying Azure into multiple jurisdictions around the globe and allowing them to actually use it in the different locations, but see it as one entity for them to manage. This one's an insurance company, and this is another area that we get a lot of discussions and a lot of conversations around US headquartered businesses. So it's difficult for me to, I suppose, say this, seems like a Microsoft event, but we do have clients that they just cannot use Microsoft's public cloud because Microsoft is a HQ'd company in the US, and under the Cloud Act, even though what the Cloud Act has done is given a very clear process about how the government can get data, it clearly states that they can go to a US headquartered company and ask for data that is not in jurisdiction. So and even though there is an appeals process, there are a lot of companies that find that unnervy. You've got other things like the Patriot Act, the FISA Act. There's a lot of laws within the US that make it very easy for the government to get that data without proper due process. And this isn't about hiding data, by the way. Let's be very clear about that. It's about actually ensuring that there is proper due process done if someone wants to access the data. So we have clients that are very sensitive to where the data is, but also ultimately who the owner of that or the processor of that data is. In our case, us, Calligo. We're not a US headquartered company. And that's, for these guys, that's the main driver. They needed the technology, they wanted the Azure capabilities, but they had to keep it outside of any Azure public cloud. That's the difference, because there are Azure public clouds in the EU, for example, but this required them to be, they just didn't want to be on a Microsoft-owned cloud. And actually, I don't know if you're aware, but within Germany, there's a Azure cloud, a full-blown Azure cloud that is not run by Microsoft. You pay 30% extra to go on that, and it's completely separated from Microsoft. But it is a full-blown Azure Stack. I mean Azure Cloud, not Azure Stack. And then this one is an interesting one. This is I can't talk too much about it really, but I wanted to put it on there because it's a really interesting one in the sense that we're working with a client at the moment that are right at the beginning of deploying a massive new, as it says, fanzine type environment. I can't tell you which sport it is, I'm afraid. Let's just say it's a big sport though. And it's going to have literally hundreds of millions of users on it. They're going to be global users, but there'll be a huge number of EU citizens. This is actually going to be a hybrid. So all the data is being stored on the Azure Stack, but it's actually going to be in Europe. They're less worried about the jurisdictional thing in the sense of where it is, as long as it's in the EU. they care more about the owner of the platform itself. So the web side of it and all the expansion that the web side needs to do as these fans come on and go off, different times of the week will be busier. It's a sport, so it has busier times. And that's all going to be in the Azure cloud, but all the data held and processed and everything is going to be on the stack. So this is my understanding is this will be the largest hybrid Azure implementation in the world when it goes live. So that gives you hopefully gives you a flavour of who we are and what we've used. And we couldn't have done any of this without Lenovo. They've been a great partner for us over the years, and they've more than shown their worth again with this technology. At the end of the day, this was a version 1 product, and the support's been brilliant from them. They're always bringing out the next nodes quicker than the competition still, which is great. So we get to the next level of technology quicker than our competitors can. And also, if you're looking at the Azure Stack as a deployment, whether you're doing it multi-tenancy like us or you're doing it as private, the actual services you get that are wrapped around it are really good, because this does actually come like an appliance. So it turns up as a rack fully built, and it's commissioned and plugged in, and practically you just put it into your network infrastructure and then you start using it and consuming it. And then they do updates, and it's like a managed service behind the scenes for you. So it's a real sort of white glove type of environment. And for us, that's quite handy. We've got 100 million things to do, which I'm sure all you guys have. So there's quite a few things we don't have to do on this, because these guys do it for us, which is great. So that's me done. Ooh. Look at that, 1 minute over, it's not bad. Thank you very much. Oh, got a question. Yeah, stick that one there.
How many Azure Stack instances, stamps do you run total globally?
So we've got 6 stacks live. So we've got 1 in Canada. We're about to probably put another one in Canada, in Vancouver actually. So we're in Toronto, right, literally 2 miles away from the public Azure cloud. So we're going Vancouver by the end of the year. We're in London, we're in Luxembourg, and we're in Jersey and Guernsey in the Channel Islands.
Multiple instances in each location? I mean, how do you scale?
So,
I was just going to repeat the question back. Multiple instances in each location, how do you scale?
yeah, so there are some challenges because Azure Stack can't do everything the Azure cloud does. So we do have to use other technologies to fill some of the gaps. So like for the DR side of things is probably the weakest part of the Azure Stack right now, because there's no real functionality. There's a preview of the DR capabilities that you can get in the Azure cloud, but that is from the Azure Stack to the Azure cloud. It's not from Azure Stack to Azure Stack. So we have to use a few other technologies around that. Now that it's 16 nodes, there's a lot of capacity. And we just use inter-networking to just expand beyond one stack. But we have to do all of that. It's not like built in at the moment. Any other questions?
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
When you say you have 6 installations, is that 6 companies or 6 stacks that many companies are using?
No, 6 stacks with multiple companies on all the stacks, yeah.
And you mentioned that Germany has a full Azure cloud that's not run by Microsoft.
Correct, yeah.
It costs 30% more to take advantage of. Who maintains it? Is that?
I think it's Deutsche Telekom off the top of my head. So either them or T-Systems. I can't remember which one out of the two.
Okay.
You can, when you go on and have a look, on Microsoft's website, you can actually see it is listed there.
Okay.
It's just that it's put in trust, and Microsoft have no access to the data. So the US government, they could subpoena it, but they've got no way of touching it. Yeah.
And then finally, you mentioned about hybrids, these hybrid services. You said the data is stored locally, but the services are still public services.
It's some of our clients do that. So it's where you've got the big sort of web front end, and you've got a lot of users coming in.
Yeah.
The scale that the cloud gives you over the stack, of course, is very clear. It's much, much bigger and flexible.
Right.
So a lot of the requests for hitting the websites happen in the cloud, but all the processing of the data is stored actually on the stack.
But doesn't the data have to go to the cloud and be processed and then stored again?
No, you're only seeing the input and output on the front end. The actual processing and storing is at the back end. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. one at the back there.
Sorry, you were going to say something about Canada and why you had to put a...
Sorry, it's not very loud, that one.
You said something about Canada, like there's special reasons you had to put Azure Stack.
Oh, right, yeah, sorry about that.
So why was there a special, why was Canada a special use case for putting in Azure Stack? Go ahead.
Right, so there's a concept, when you're dealing with GDPR, there's a concept called adequacy status. So the EU can work with other countries around the world, and there's about a dozen of them that have what's known as adequacy rating. In other words, they deem the law to be as good as the law in the EU. And what it means is you can store data there and in effect move it between that location and the EU without having to do anything else. So we have clients that have a lot of EU citizens' data that are in Canada, and even though you can do it with the public cloud, the fact that we're EU headquartered, well, not EU headquarters because just not in the EU, but we're in Europe. We've got multiple, all our locations bar one has adequacy rating. They wanted to be able to leverage the fact that if they put the data on our environment, they know their compliance around GDPR is going to be a lot less hassle than if they have to use Microsoft. Because even though Microsoft have done quite a lot of work around GDPR, they're still a US headquartered company and we're not. So it was manipulating the link between the two privacy laws, basically. Okay, thanks guys.
Please fill out your surveys. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.